1926.1412 Inspections to Subpart C. C. Cranes and derricks in construction. 1926.1412 A. Modified equipment. 1926.1412 A. 1 through A. 2 Equipment that has had modifications or additions which affect the safe operation of the equipment, such as modifications or additions involving a safety device or operational aid, critical part of a control system, power plant, braking system, load-sustaining structural components, load hook, or in-use operating mechanism, or capacity must be inspected by a qualified person after such modifications/additions have been completed, prior to initial use. The inspection must meet all of the following requirements. The inspection must assure that the modifications or additions have been done in accordance with the approval obtained pursuant to Section 1926.1434, Equipment Modifications. The inspection must include functional testing of the equipment. 1926.1412 A.2 Equipment must not be used until an inspection under this paragraph demonstrates that the requirements of paragraph A.1.I of this section have been met. 1926.1412 B. Repaired/adjusted equipment. 1926.1412 B.1 Equipment that has had a repair or adjustment that relates to safe operation, such as a repair or adjustment to a safety device or operator aid, or to a critical part of a control system, power plant, braking system, load-sustaining structural components, load hook, or in-use operating mechanism, must be inspected by a qualified person after such a repair or adjustment has been completed, prior to initial use. The inspection must meet all of the following requirements. 1926.1412 B.1.I through B.1.2 The qualified person must determine if the repair/adjustment meets manufacturer equipment criteria, or applicable and available. Where manufacturer equipment criteria are unavailable or inapplicable, the qualified person must 1926.1412 B.1.2 A through B. Determine if a registered professional engineer, RPE, is needed to develop criteria for the repair/adjustment. If an RPE is not needed, the employer must ensure that the criteria are developed by the qualified person. If an RPE is needed, the employer must ensure that they are developed by an RPE. Determine if the repair/adjustment meets the criteria developed in accordance with paragraph B.1.2a of this section. 1926.1412 B.1.3 The inspection must include functional testing of the repaired/adjusted parts and other components that may be affected by the repair/adjustment. 1926.1412 B.4 Equipment must not be used until an inspection under this paragraph demonstrates that the repair/adjustment meets the requirements of paragraph B.1.I of this section, or, where applicable, paragraph B.1.2 of this section. 1926.1412 C. Post-assembly. 1926.1412 C.1 Upon completion of assembly, the equipment must be inspected by a qualified person to assure that it is configured in accordance with manufacturer equipment criteria. 1926.1412 C.2 Where manufacturer equipment criteria are unavailable, a qualified person must 1926.1412 C.2.I through C.2.2 Determine if a registered professional engineer, RPE, familiar with the type of equipment involved is needed to develop criteria for the equipment configuration. If an RPE is not needed, the employer must ensure that the criteria are developed by the qualified person. If an RPE is needed, the employer must ensure that they are developed by an RPE. Determine if the equipment meets the criteria developed in accordance with paragraph C.2.I of this section. 1926.1412 C.3 Equipment must not be used until an inspection under this paragraph demonstrates that the equipment is configured in accordance with the applicable criteria. 1926.1412 D. Each shift. 1926.1412 D.1 A competent person must begin a visual inspection prior to each shift the equipment will be used, which must be completed before or during that shift. The inspection must consist of observation for apparent deficiencies. Taking apart equipment components and booming down is not required as part of this inspection unless the results of the visual inspection or trial operation indicate that further investigation necessitating taking apart equipment components or booming down is needed. Determinations made in conducting the inspection must be reassessed in light of observations made during operation. At a minimum, the inspection must include all of the following: 1926.1412 D1I through D114, control mechanisms for maladjustments interfering with proper operation. Control and drive mechanisms for apparent excessive wear of components and contamination by lubricants, water, or other foreign matter. Air, hydraulic, and other pressurized lines for deterioration or leakage, particularly those which flex in normal operation. Hydraulic system for proper fluid level. Hooks and latches for deformation, cracks, excessive wear, or damage such as from chemicals or heat. Wire rope reeving for compliance with the manufacturer's specifications. Wire rope, in accordance with Section 1926.1413a. Electrical apparatus for malfunctioning, signs of apparent excessive deterioration, dirt or moisture accumulation. Tires, when in use, for proper inflation and condition. Ground conditions around the equipment for proper support, including ground settling under and around outriggers/stabilizers and supporting foundations, groundwater accumulation, or similar conditions. This paragraph does not apply to the inspection of ground conditions for railroad tracks and their underlying support when the railroad tracks are part of the general railroad system of transportation that is regulated pursuant to the Federal Railroad Administration under 49 CFR Part 213. The equipment for level position within the tolerances specified by the equipment manufacturer's recommendations, both before each shift and after each move and setup. Operator cab windows for significant cracks, breaks, or other deficiencies that would hamper the operator's view. Rails, rail stops, rail clamps, and supporting surfaces when the equipment has rail traveling. This paragraph does not apply to the inspection of rails, rail stops, rail clamps, and supporting surfaces when the railroad tracks are part of the general railroad system of transportation that is regulated pursuant to the Federal Railroad Administration under 49 CFR Part 213. Safety devices and operational aids for proper operation. 1926.1412 D2. If any deficiency in paragraphs D1I through 13 of this section, or in additional inspection items required to be checked for specific types of equipment in accordance with other sections of this standard, is identified, an immediate determination must be made by the competent person as to whether the deficiency constitutes a safety hazard. If the deficiency is determined to constitute a safety hazard, the equipment must be taken out of service until it has been corrected. See Section 1926.1417. 1926.1412 D3. If any deficiency in paragraph D114 of this section, safety devices/operational aids, is identified, the action specified in sections 1926.1415 and 1926.1416 must be taken prior to using the equipment. 1926.1412 E. Monthly. 1926.1412 E1. Each month the equipment is in service, it must be inspected in accordance with paragraph D of this section, each shift. 1926.1412 E2. Equipment must not be used until an inspection under this paragraph demonstrates that no corrective action under paragraphs D2 and 3 of this section is required. 1926.1412 E3. Documentation. 1926.1412 E3I. The following information must be documented and maintained by the employer that conducts the inspection. 1926.1412 E3I A and B. The items checked and the results of the inspection. The name and signature of the person who conducted the inspection and the date. 1926.1412 E3-2. This document must be retained for a minimum of 3 months. 1926.1412 F. Annual/comprehensive. 1926.1412 F1. At least every 12 months the equipment must be inspected by a qualified person in accordance with paragraph D of this section, each shift, except that the corrective action set forth in paragraphs F4, F5, and F6 of this section must apply in place of the corrective action required by paragraphs D2 and D3 of this section. 1926.1412 F2. In addition, at least every 12 months, the equipment must be inspected by a qualified person. Disassembly is required, as necessary, to complete the inspection. The equipment must be inspected for all of the following. 1926.1412 F2I. Equipment structure, including the boom and, if equipped, the jib. 1926.1412 F2I A through C. Structural members, deformed, cracked, or significantly corroded. Bolts, rivets, and other fasteners, loose, failed, or significantly corroded. Welds for cracks. 1926.1412 F2 through F221. Sheaves and drums for cracks or significant wear. Parts such as pins, bearings, shafts, gears, rollers, and locking devices for distortion, cracks, or significant wear. Brake and clutch system parts, linings, pawls, and ratchets for excessive wear. Safety devices and operational aids for proper operation, including significant inaccuracies. Gasoline, diesel, electric, or other power plants for safety-related problems, such as leaking exhaust and emergency shutdown feature and conditions, and proper operation. Chains and chain drive sprockets for excessive wear of sprockets and excessive chain stretch. Travel steering, brakes, and locking devices for proper operation. Tires for damage or excessive wear. Hydraulic, pneumatic, and other pressurized hoses, fittings, and tubing, as follows. Flexible hose or its junction with the fittings for indications of leaks. Threaded or clamped joints for leaks. Outer covering of the hose for blistering, abnormal deformation, or other signs of failure/impending failure. Outer surface of a hose, rigid tube, or fitting for indications of excessive abrasion or scrubbing. Hydraulic and pneumatic pumps and motors, as follows. Performance indicators, unusual noises or vibration, low operating speed, excessive heating of the fluid, low pressure. Loose bolts or fasteners. Shaft seals and joints between pump sections for leaks. Hydraulic and pneumatic valves, as follows. Spools, sticking, improper return to neutral, and leaks. Leaks. Valve housing cracks. Relief valves, failure to reach correct pressure. If there is a manufacturer procedure for checking pressure, it must be followed. Hydraulic and pneumatic cylinders, as follows. Drifting caused by fluid leaking across the piston. Rod seals and welded joints for leaks. Cylinder rods for scores, nicks, or dents. Case, barrel, for significant dents. Rod eyes and connecting joints, loose or deformed. Outrigger or stabilizer pads/floats for excessive wear or cracks. Slider pads for excessive wear or cracks. Electrical components and wiring for cracked or split insulation and loose or corroded terminations. Warning labels and decals originally supplied with the equipment by the manufacturer or otherwise required under this standard, missing or unreadable. Originally equipped operator seat or equivalent missing. Operator seat, unserviceable. Originally equipped steps, ladders, handrails, guards, missing. Steps, ladders, handrails, guards, in unusable/unsafe condition. 1926.1412 F3. This inspection must include functional testing to determine that the equipment as configured in the inspection is functioning properly. 1926.1412 F4. If any deficiency is identified, an immediate determination must be made by the qualified person as to whether the deficiency constitutes a safety hazard or, though not yet a safety hazard, needs to be monitored in the monthly inspections. 1926.1412 F5. If the qualified person determines that a deficiency is a safety hazard, the equipment must be taken out of service until it has been corrected, except when temporary alternative measures are implemented as specified in Section 1926.1416 D. or Section 1926.1435 E. See Section 1926.1417. 1926.1412 F6. If the qualified person determines that, though not presently a safety hazard, the deficiency needs to be monitored, the employer must ensure that the deficiency is checked in the monthly inspections. 1926.1412 F7 Documentation of Annual/Comprehensive Inspection. The following information must be documented, maintained, and retained for a minimum of 12 months by the employer that conducts the inspection. 1926.1412 F7I and F7.2 The items checked and the results of the inspection. The name and signature of the person who conducted the inspection and the date. 1926.1412 G. Severe service. Where the severity of use/conditions is such that there is a reasonable probability of damage or excessive wear, such as loading that may have exceeded rated capacity, shock loading that may have exceeded rated capacity, prolonged exposure to a corrosive atmosphere, the employer must stop using the equipment and a qualified person must. 1926.1412 G1 through G3 Inspect the equipment for structural damage to determine if the equipment can continue to be used safely. In light of the use/conditions, determine whether any items/conditions listed in paragraph F of this section need to be inspected. If so, the qualified person must inspect those items/conditions. If a deficiency is found, the employer must follow the requirements in paragraphs F4 through 6 of this section. 1926.1412 H. Equipment not in regular use. Equipment that has been idle for 3 months or more must be inspected by a qualified person in accordance with the requirements of paragraph E. monthly of this section before initial use. 1926.1412 I. Reserved. 1926.1412 J. Any part of a manufacturer's procedures regarding inspections that relate to safe operation, such as to a safety device or operational aid, critical part of a control system, power plant, braking system, load-sustaining structural components, load hook, or in-use operating mechanism, that is more comprehensive or has a more frequent schedule of inspection than the requirements of this section must be followed. 1926.1412 K. All documents produced under this section must be available, during the applicable document retention period, to all persons who conduct inspections under this section.